What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here and welcome to a new album review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the latest album from the godfather of heavy metal, the Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne, entitled Patient Number 9. Patient Number 9 is his 13th album in his discography, and this is the follow-up to the previous album back in 2020, which many people, myself included, cited it as a comeback record of Ordinary Man, which, to be honest with you, I have never been a fan of that album whatsoever, because while I do appreciate the emotional impact and imagery of the lyrics, it did suffer drastically with some of the cringiest lyrics to very stale and average way of songwriting and progression, and some of the production, guitar tones wise, really did not help a big, massive improvement, because Ordinary Man did have some very difficult stuff for me to accept it as highly as many of the fans really do. But with that being said, I have been a long time Black Sabbath fanatic, and for me, being from Birmingham, I always appreciate what Ozzy really wanted to achieve and make something. And this is the second album to be produced by Andrew Watt, who also produced Ordinary Man and has done some of the guitar work. This is released through Epic Records, and Patient Number 9 was an album that was pretty much in the making right after the release and received reception of his last album. So when Patient Number 9 was dropping into this new material, I was not worried, but at the same time, I was hoping that this album could be more of the return with that very ballsy, rocky, and distinctive vein on something really catchy, memorable, and to hopefully have some of the most great aspects of when I really appreciated Ozzy as a solo artist. But when I listen to this album, unfortunately, I personally feel the same as I did with Ordinary Man. But in my personal opinion, I think that Patient Number 9 is an album which has been made with a lot of optimism, and there were promises that were there that I got to like some of the album's worthwhile material, surprisingly just a tad bit more than the last record. I don't think that Ozzy has made another really strong album in ages, because I think the last near perfect album across his discography was No More Tears back in '91, and I think with the albums from Blizzard of Oz right the way through to the mentioned No More Tears, Ozzy at that peak was something that I really enjoy so much, if not the most, than what's been going on after No More Tears. We've got the very experimental, controversially dividing album Osmosis, to really mediocre albums to me like Black Rain and Down to Earth. But with that being said, Ozzy Osbourne is one of my idols, and I think, like I said, that Ozzy wants to do something that sounds good to him, and just like with Ordinary Man, this album has been a big list with other musicians involved who worked with Ozzy for this record. You've got Jeff Beck, Zakk Wylde, Eric Clapton, Robert Trujillo, Chad Smith, Mike Mccready, amongst many other guest appearances. The title track, Patient Number 9, the longest track on this album, over 7 minutes, did start things off in a pretty promising way, and I really did like that opening guitar lick. Jeff Beck does what he does best with his own way on iconic soloing and guitar sounds, and Jeff Beck is the guitarist to this album that I think is one of the other really good moments, as well as some of the others I'll get to later on. Structure-wise on this track is not too bad, and I think that the pacing to this one, while it went on quite a bit long, is a pretty passable movement. But the worst part about this track was completely destructive by the worst sound of the vocals from Ozzy himself. The vocals to this track are at a disgusting move on a ton of vocal processing and editing. This is something really abysmal. This is not as natural. Why couldn't Ozzy have his own sounding voice like what he did at the Commonwealth Games finale when he and Tony Iommi played Paranoid? That derails the adrenaline and the attaching feeling that I wanted to give a lot of this title track credit for. But despite that, Patient Number 9 is not one of the strong tracks. It's nothing like a great track like Over the Mountain to Mr. Tinker Train, Bark the Moon, etc. But I didn't mind this track despite that very negative drawback. However, one of the better tracks, in my opinion, is on the next track, Immortal, with Mike Mccready. I really think this was a very, very good track. Mike's guitar work is brilliant on this one. His soloing has been one of my favorites, and for me, being a fan of Pearl Jam, Mike involving with Ozzy did a really good job. His playing to this one was excellent, and for just 3 brief amounts of minutes, this does have a more of a consistency and a better memorable approach into the songwriting. And same goes on to No Escape From Now featuring Tony Iommi. The beginning just instantly makes me wonder on the heavily flanger of effect from Zeitgeist from the Black Sabbath album 13. But when the track goes into Tony Iommi's appearance, his riffs are really, really good here. And it's pretty progressive one at that as well, for nearly 7 minutes. But I do like the idea that he decides to change up the riff towards near the last few legs of the track's consistency. When I hear Iommi into this track, makes me think about like the classic period of Black Sabbath, because this could have been, me being honest, this could have been like on a separate Black Sabbath track. But I do think No Escape From Now is one of the other really good moments on this record. And same goes on to Degradation Rules, another track featuring Tony Iommi. And I was pretty impressed with this one as well. And you can hear Ozzy being really presentable in the harmonica, brief amounts of notes here and there into this track. It's pretty rocking with really good bluesy and effective way on guitar skills, as Iommi has always been one of my idols. While it's, sometimes pretty questionable into the lyrics, because there are points lyrically on various tracks where it can get pretty silly, but Degradation Rules instrumentally does have a terrific move and groove at the same time. When it goes into the other guitarist appearances like Zakk Wylde on tracks like Evil Shuffle, I think Evil Shuffle is another one that I liked quite a lot, and I always respect Zakk Wylde as a guitarist, dominate the most. Some of his guitar skills have always been amazing and impressive, but some of his lead work so crisp and adding a separate dynamic. Other tracks, like most of the ballads, like 1,000 Shades to Nothing Feels Right, unfortunately, these types of ballads, to me, at many places felt really disconnecting and tiring, that it feels pedestrian. And that is one of the other gripes that I have with this record, because when it comes into the other ballads on previous albums, like Mama I'm Coming Home to Goodbye to Romance, from earlier records, those sounds of ballads had a lot of emotion and a different style, especially for vocal melody. But on here, the softer tracks on Patient Number 9, they did try, but they went on in that repetitive way where it derails the enjoyment and the ability that I wanted to give a lot of credit for on this record. But don't get me wrong, Ozzy vocally on most of the tracks, despite the vocal processing, he does give it all that he has got. But I find at the same time, instrumentally, to the overall premise and purpose of this album, it was all nothing but a middle of the road and somewhat, not as an equal amount of productively strong and better ways of songwriting, in my opinion. I do give a lot of the musicians a lot of the credit, especially onto the great ideas on drumming from the late Taylor Hawkins to Chad Smith and other household names, Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age to two of the musicians from Jane's Addiction, and as I've mentioned about Zakk Wylde, Tony Iommi and Jeff Beck. But as an album, Patient Number 9 does have the moments that I did like, but throughout this whole album, for an hour's work, one of the difficult ones to really think this is one of the better albums, as many fans say that it is, because I don't agree with that. The baddest thing about this record is the production. The production is all over the place. As I am a full-time musician and album listener, I was paying attention heavily into the sound of the guitar tones to the drums. These tones on some of the guitars lackluster so bad, there's barely enough on that rich, thick and bigger sound. And the drums, to me, the way they were mixed and balanced this way, some of them are just as unnatural, like on Ozzy's vocals. And when I hear the sound of the drums on various tracks, it's like that they've been added from any music editing processing software, like Reaper, for example, because with earlier Ozzy albums, there was a separate and better mark on a distinctive and punchy, presentable, stunning sound and tone, whereas with Patient Number 9 does not do that. And that's all I said for a few seconds about Ordinary Man's production as well. So Andrew Watt, I give him respect for delivering something, as he's been a producer for various artists in different genres, but as a producer, he is not one of my favorites. Still give him credit for what he likes to do and being quite a talented guitarist as well. But this is another one that I never would think that this is one of the best on hearing any Ozzy album in that rich and big enough production. So with that being said, Patient Number 9 by Ozzy Osbourne is, for me, a difficult record to have a better approach on, because there were some songs that I did like, but it's the overall pacing to the experience that fulfills not all of a complete big satisfaction to my approach when I listen to this record. And this is not one of his weakest records. It's, just something that I kind of liked, but at the same time, it is nowhere near one of the better records across his career. And even if this would be his last album, I wouldn't be too turned off by it, because Ozzy's legacy still remains so strong to this day, and who knows what could happen in the future for Ozzy. But Patient Number 9 is a record when it does have some potential, but in my opinion, this was just Ozzy by numbers, and I hate to say it like that, because I have always been such an admirer of Ozzy, and it's not just Black Sabbath, but Ozzy as a whole has been one of my favourites. But this album did deliver some of the goods, but not a package of all top-notch musical quality. That's personally all I would like to say about Patient Number 9 by Ozzy, and let me know what you think of this album in the comments down below. Do you think that this is one of his best albums? Do you love this album? Or do you feel the same way as I have expressed my opinions? I'm going to give Patient Number 9 by Ozzy Osbourne a 5.5 out of 10. And that's just as brutally honest as I want to say. For those of you who have been waiting my thoughts on what I would say on this album, there you have it. So, I love Ozzy, but this is not one of the better albums of the year at all to me. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.